Welcome to TKQ&A, questions and answers about transitional kindergarten. I'm your host, Amy Moser, UPK coordinator for the Kern County Superintendent of Schools. Today, I have a guest in studio, very excited to welcome, actually here in Bakersfield, Julie Kurtz, author, founder of the Center for Optimal Brain Integration. Julie, welcome to the studio.
It is so good to be here in person and good to see you.
Yes, you too. I'm so glad to have you here. We had a conversation on a podcast episode last year about behaviors. And so at the end of that podcast, I said, we have to bring you back because this is going to be an issue. And at the time, we were talking about why are there behaviors in TK. And we were talking about children coming to TK when they were just turning 4. And now they are here and they are just turning 4 and they are young. And we get phone calls all the time saying, what do I do about behaviors? So you're here today to solve all those problems. You're going to tell us exactly what to do so that we all know and everything will be solved and all behaviors in Kern County will be gone.
That's the dream.
That is the dream. But there's no magic wand for this. So I would encourage, if this is your first time listening to this and you haven't heard the Julie episode, go back and listen to that episode on the why do we have so many challenging behaviors in TK? Because today we're going to talk about what systems are in place to support children in TK with their behaviors, right?
You got it.
And so last time we talked, you gave us a few indicators of why these behaviors are happening. So we said COVID.
The brain development. Children have immature nervous systems. 50% of our kids under the age of 6 have experienced toxic stress. We have a lot of technology being used, so the development is being delayed. Multiple reasons. Either way, we know they're entering with an immature nervous system, and we learned that in the last podcast. Today, we're going to focus on the systems that need to be in place in a classroom or a school that a leader can think about that's going to help over the long run, because there's no magical one strategy that's going to fix that one behavior.
No, and it's many behaviors. So we get a lot of calls, as I said, about this, and I think that is the hope, that when they call us, we'll be able to go out and do some observations and say, oh, change this, oh, do this, and it will make it better. But it's not. It's very hard to manage those behaviors, and teachers are really struggling. So can I share with you some of the behaviors that we heard? We have heard biting, kicking, hitting, spitting, eloping, just defiance, like just, no, I don't want to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. And then just the general fit throwing, harming other children, harming the teacher, taking materials and throwing them around the room.
Yes.
So a lot of dysregulated behavior is what we hear in that list.
Can I take one of those examples of biting? When people ask me to come in and observe and say, why is this child biting? I say there could be multiple reasons. 1, they might be biting because they're trying to communicate a feeling and they don't have the words. 2, they could be biting because they're trying to get everybody away from them and they want to be alone. 3, they could be biting possibly because they're trying to engage in play and they don't know how to. And I could go on and on. The first thing we have to think about is all behavior is communicating a story about the nervous system. And a lot of times kids this age, they don't have the words to appropriately say, excuse me, teacher, I just want to pause for a moment and let you know that I'm really not able to regulate right now because you're making us focus for long periods of time. I can't sit still. I need to go do some big body movement or whatever it may be.
Right.
That's the hard part, is guessing the meaning behind the behavior.
It is. And I think, to be fair, when we talk about this list of behaviors, if you were a preschool teacher or worked in early learning in like a childcare setting or a preschool child development center setting, these behaviors happen all the time and are pretty typical. But when you merge this early childhood system with a K-12 system that really isn't used to seeing behaviors that are this escalated for them, probably when children entered kindergarten, there was some of this, but not to this extent. I think they're really feeling the impact of the children being essentially just coming out of toddlerhood is what they are when they're coming in at 3. So I know that you have some thoughts on how districts can have some systems in place, or there are systems already in place that districts can look at through a different lens to think about these behaviors and how to begin planning for support.
I think you brought up a lot of very good points. One is we've got early childhood teachers, and I'm going to put them in the label of early childhood, even though they're connected to schools and districts and elementary. But when you're working with kids under the age of 6, it's different.
It is.
And the academic learning is different than in elementary. And we're taking a lot of elementary age teachers, putting them in early childhood, and we're saying, do the exact same thing, which is
Right.
lecture and the way that you set up your classroom. That's the first thing we need to look at, is educating about early childhood and developmentally appropriate practices for teaching. That's the first thing. It's not sitting and lecturing for long periods of time.
Right.
That's one of the systemic things that we have to look at together. But there's also, in every district, there's some element of an MTSS model. We also nationally call it the pyramid model, which is universal strategies at the bottom of the pyramid that are good for all kids. And oftentimes those are nurturing responsive relationships and community and connection and expectations for behavior. Then we move up the pyramid and there are different levels. There's environment strategies that promote regulation. And then as you move up, it's intentional teaching strategies, like intentionally teaching 1, emotions, 2, how to regulate big emotions, 3, once your emotions are regulated, how do I find a solution to my problem that will be not hurting others, myself, or things around me. And we have to intentionally teach those. And when we get to the top of the MTSS model or the pyramid model, we look at intentional interventions for individualized children that are having persistent challenging behaviors. I'm going to say one more thing. If it's like going to the gym, if I make a New Year's resolution on January 1st that I want to lose 5 pounds or I want to build bigger muscles, I can't do that by going to the gym one time. I am not going to make a child behave humanely or have resilience or build skills by just doing one strategy one time. That's why we're calling it a systemic approach. It has to be consistent and persistent at all the levels of the pyramid or the MTSS model in order to make a difference. That's why we're talking about systems today.
So when you're thinking about that bottom tier, which you said was around relationship and building relationships, thinking about the children that are coming in, there is some stress for them coming in because they're leaving their parents, some of them for the very first time, and they're very young, and they're going into a building they have no idea. And the expectations that are in that classroom are not something that they're familiar with.
Yes.
This is all brand new for them. So when you think about that MTSS model, just from the perspective of I'm a 3-year-old that just turned 4 and I'm coming through that door, what would be a strategy in that first tier, like good for all children, good
Yes.
for everybody walking through? Where do you start in that area?
Well, I'm going to start with imagining a little nervous system that's immature coming in and knowing that of the 4 things that tend to trigger any nervous system, yours, mine, or that child, it's newness and unpredictability. And so with children who are coming in with immature nervous systems because they're being triggered by newness, unpredictability, which makes our nervous system activated, which makes more challenging behaviors, we have to create predictability. 2 simple ways to create predictability, because we want our listeners to walk away with some concrete strategies. The first is a visual schedule that tells children what the schedule of the day is, not with words, but with pictures and going over that over and over and over. Oh, then my nervous system goes, okay, that's the schedule. That's when I get to see my mom or my grandma or my abuelita or my dad. How many more things do I have to do? The second thing is not so much rules as teaching them the expectations. And when we live in a family, when we live in a tribe, when we live in a city or a town, we have rules, but we also have expectations for behavior. My top 4 are: we are safe, we are respectful, we are kind and friendly, and we are healthy. Those 4 expectations, every rule that you have in your classroom can fall under those. And so when we teach kids the expectations, we don't do it to say, stop doing that, you're not being friendly. Stop doing that, you're not being kind. It's actually to say, catch the children being really good and doing those. So I can say, Amy, you sneezed in your elbow. That was being so healthy. You're not spreading your germs. Or Amy, you helped your friend. That was being so friendly. Now I'm giving you lots of attention for positive behavior. And all the other kids are looking, saying, I should do that too. Instead of creating a culture of you're bad, you did it wrong.
Right. And so those skills need to be practiced, just like any other of the skills that they're learning in TK. I know that as we build out these podcast episodes, we're going to be breaking these different tiers into separate episodes so we can really dive into how do you build relationship, how do you teach intentionally, but thinking about the social emotional piece and that expectations and the routines that are in the classroom, that has to be taught, and that social emotional development is critical, more so in the beginning than the literacy piece, than the math piece. It is about teaching social emotional skills because they don't have them.
Yes. And to connect it to the previous podcast, none of us, you, me, or a child in a TK class, can listen and learn unless we're regulated, because we can't access the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for thinking, listening, learning academics, is totally inaccessible if we're dysregulated. So if we don't simultaneously, intentionally, persistently teach kids how to identify their emotions and how to manage big emotions by building a toolkit of strategies that will calm myself, you're not going to have a lot of good listeners in the classroom. And so what you said is so critical, and I can't wait to address that.
And so that would be, we said tier 1 is the relationship. I probably jumped ahead to tier 3. Circle back, rewind to tier 2.
Tier 2, an environment strategy.
Okay.
One takeaway. In the environment, there are 2 things that I'd like to offer to take away. One is children need big body movement to regulate under the age of 6. Lots and lots of lifting, pushing, moving, running, climbing up slides. If they don't get that and they're required, and most early childhood programs only do about 8 or less % of big body movement, and they do over 90% of sitting, squatting, and requiring of listening. That's one reason why we have so much dysregulated behavior. So a lot of movement, dance, freeze dance, stop-go games, anything that creates big body movement. Obstacle courses, they love those, and they love it if you time them. The second thing is creating some areas in the classroom where children can get away. I'm introverted. That's one reason. Some kids, the classroom, the lights, the constant noise is overstimulating to their nervous system, but if they have a calming area or a place to get away or noise-canceling headphones or sensory objects to help them regulate, they will naturally go there and you will have fewer challenging behaviors.
Now let me pose a question to you that is kind of the opposing or the naysayer to that area.
Yes.
Which would be, well, if I build this area and they just want to get up and go over there whenever they want, then everybody's going to want to do that. Like every child's going to want to get up while I'm doing my instruction, and they're going to want to leave and they're going to want to go sit over there to get out of doing work.
That's one of the biggest fears that teachers have. Early childhood all the way to 12th grade, I teach this. One, it's how you introduce it. It's the rules you create around it, and it's the culture in the classroom. If I had a bunch of TK kids, I would say, we need to listen to our body. We are going to hurt others, ourselves, or things around us when we have big feelings. The first and most important expectation in our classroom is that we feel calm and safe so that we can treat others with kindness. In my classroom, we don't hurt others, ourselves, or the things around us. So if you're feeling big feelings and there's a high chance you might hurt others, our property, or things around us, which is one of our expectations, to be healthy, kind, and safe, we need to go to the safe area or to the calming area. And by the way, we don't allow any children to use it until we've practiced it in circle time over and over. We have to practice, what does it feel like to have a big feeling? How do we go use the safe place? Let's practice when we're calm. The more we do that, the more we have an expectation about it.
Right. It's like the fire drill analogy, right? Like you practice that when you're calm. You don't like start a fire and then ask everybody to evacuate.
Yes.
You practice it as if there is a fire while people are calm and can practice those decisions so that it becomes almost rote and built into your memory that this is what I do when I feel this way, or this is what I do when I hear the fire alarm. The children have that practice.
The practice?
Like social emotional drills.
It's exactly the
Yes.
social emotional drills. And teachers will feel more in control if they have rules about how you enter it, how much time. When you leave, do you check in with somebody? Is there a timer? You can create that. You're in charge of that as the teacher. But the child's in charge of learning how to listen to their body and what they need in that moment to feel safe. If they're not allowed to go to that, then they might flip tables. They might punch people because what their nervous system needs right now is deep pressure into their joints to calm them. If you tell me I have to sit and I can't go, then I'm going to punch you to get the needs that I need met to regulate my nervous system. That's why we need to create in the environments pathways of regulation, not just a calming area, other things too, which we'll get to in an upcoming podcast.
And if you're just jumping into the podcast now, I'm talking with Julie Kurtz. I'm going to say trauma expert, but you wouldn't say that. But I'm going to say trauma expert.
And social emotional.
Expert / guru, author, developer of resources for all of these things. We are talking about TK behaviors and how that can be, how administrators can think about that differently in the MTSS model. We're at the 4th tier now. What is at the tippy top?
Now, in a traditional MTSS or national pyramid model, the top of the tier is for children with persistent, challenging behaviors, where the bottom levels are intentionally built into place in schools, and then fewer kids rise to the top. Those are where we do individualized support plans. But between you and I, when we're talking about this 4th level, I would say it's the strategies used for an individual child who has persistent, challenging behaviors more consistently and readily, more persistent. So for you, if you're in my classroom and you have persistent, challenging behaviors, I might use a scripted story to help you find out how to handle situations differently. And I'm hoping in one of the future podcasts we can talk about how to use a scripted story, for example. That might be a more intensive intervention for you individually. A scripted story is like you have a particular issue where every time you get mad you hit kids. So I write a scripted story that gives you a different outcome, a different narrative, and helps you practice that. That's what an individualized strategy might look like for you, not a universal strategy that's good for all kids.
Right. But the practice is key. You have
For
to
all
have,
kids.
Yes.
Yes.
But you have to have those opportunities for children to try it out and see what works for them, because there isn't a one size fits all in this. And that is, I think, the greatest frustration probably for our listeners that are teaching or working in districts, and for us as a UPK team supporting teachers and admin, is that I wish I could just say, oh my gosh, if you would just do this, like magic wand, ting, like this will change everything. And we do make suggestions, but sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes what we're suggesting doesn't work, so you might have to flip the lens a little bit, kind of back up and think about going to that base strategy again.
Yes.
And starting back at the beginning of that pyramid and thinking, okay, let's go back and think, have I established routines? Have I addressed expectations? Have I done all of those things? Because sometimes we can't clear that all up when we go out in these visits. So if I were having administrators who are listening, or teachers, if we provided them with a link to that model of what that pyramid looked like, and they were to think about it, maybe a group of teachers and the admin, or just the teachers, or maybe the administrators looking at each tier and thinking, what do we do in this tier? Identifying what is happening in those tiers. Do I have a strategy there? Do I have a system there, or do I not? Would that be a good starting place for them?
I think that's a good starting place, not only for administrators systemically, but for individual teachers. Because in summary, the reality is that we want to teach, not punish. If you bite me and I punish you for that, your nervous system only learns to be scared around me and to go hide the behavior and do it somewhere else. But if I say, wow, I'm a navigator of nervous systems and I'm an architect of your brain, then I must teach you what to do instead. And so if you're climbing on the table in my classroom, I can say to you, instead of, don't do that, stop doing that, that sort of punishment, don't, what I would do instead is say, Amy, your body looks like it needs to move and climb. Let's find a safe place for you to climb because it's not safe in our classroom to climb right here. Do you see how I'm
Yes.
teaching you what to do instead? But I'm also
Yes.
recognizing what your body needs. That's the kind of thinking shift.
And it's a practice over and over. It's not going to maybe work the first time. You're going to have to try some different strategies.
So that child learns the expectation.
So kind of wrapping up and in review of what we talked about, because it went by so fast already. What we talked about is, our question was, what systems are there for district administrators to support children in their TK classrooms with behaviors? So what systems are in place? And so not only are we going to ask that question, we asked it to you, but we're going to pose it to the administrators as we close out the episode to ask themselves what systems are in place, or teachers, what systems are in place in my district, in my classroom, that is supporting these behaviors. And what you gave us was, you shared that this could be related to the pyramid, the MTSS model, and how each tier is representative in supporting those behaviors. And that the great news is that we're going to do probably 4 more podcast episodes breaking down each of those tiers so that we can really talk in depth about strategies, because we only have 20 minutes together and we can't solve all those problems,
No.
even though that's what I promised at the beginning of the
Yes,
podcast.
you promised.
But I'm thinking that we can at least give strategies and at least give some support to teachers and admin as they start to navigate these behaviors, because they will continue each year, because the children will always be coming in as young 4s. So they'll need these in their toolbox for help.
Can I close with one last strategy?
Yes.
One last nugget
Yes.
of gold. Children with immature nervous systems, particularly under the age of 6, are building 1 million new neurosynaptic connectors every second. We have a lot of power, more than any other grade or any other age, to reteach the nervous system how to behave in humane ways. And one of the top ways is a calm adult. And so we have to look at teachers recognizing that when they're overwhelmed, when they come to work without having balanced their own nervous system to be regulated or fill their own bucket up, when they see something, child's behavior that triggers them, it shows in their face and tone. The number one way that a child feels safe is the tone of voice and the facial expression of the teacher. And so teachers have a lot of power of keeping nervous systems in their classroom regulated by staying calm, by staying regulated even when they have a buzzing bee of stress inside of them. And that's the bottom of the pyramid. Those attuned, nurturing relationships go very far in helping children feel safe.
So what I hear is a 5th episode on helping
We'll just keep
teachers regulate themselves.
Their own nervous systems.
Absolutely. Julie, our time is already up. I'm so grateful you were here today and in studio, and now I've committed you to 5 more episodes.
I'm coming
So,
back. I'm living in the studio
Yes.
now.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for the listeners who are listening. Thanks for listening.